Good morning. Welcome to our live Q&A call. I'm Steve Porcaro with Rubin. Today we're going to be talking about motivating your sales team. And I'd just like to take a moment, go over a few housekeeping tips. Number one, if you need to mute yourself, *6 on the phone, or if you're logged on to the computer, on the bottom of your menu bar in the lower left, there's a little microphone. You can click that on or off to turn off your microphone. And you can also toggle your video on and off if you would like to turn your video off. We are recording this. If for some reason you have to jump off the call, we'll send you a link to the recording and we'll share this with the groups, but it's a great way for us to be on here and have access as a recording. Also, if you'd like to submit a question, you can send an email to us at support@salesplusmvp.com. If we can take it live, we'll do it right now on the air. If not, we'll add it to the list and we'll try to get to it in an upcoming show that we're doing, or episode. I don't know what to call this, but it's something, right? Our live weekly call. Also, if you're on the call, and you're on the phone and you'd like to ask a question, we'll take a moment and we'll ask. Feel free to jump in and say, "Hi, this is Steve. I'd like to ask a question." Just let us know that you're available and just *6. Sometimes people forget to unmute that. Also, if you're on the computer or your smartphone, again, on your toolbar, there's a little, in the bottom right, there's 3 dots. There's a window, a chat window, where you can submit a question by chatting and sending it over to us, and we'll try to take it live. Barry, anything I forgot about housekeeping that you'd like to
add? No, I think that's everything. But if you are in a noisy area, just make sure that you do mute yourself and only unmute it for questions, because if there's cars or noises, it will pop up your audio over what's going on the screen.
Okay, thank you for that. So what we're going to do, we're going to jump right in. It's top of the hour, and we want to be able to respect everyone's time. Our topic for today is how to motivate your sales team. And, you know, one of the reasons why I brought this up, because I work with a number of, this topic comes up on a regular basis. When I'm working with business owners or managers, it's always a question that comes up. How do I motivate my sales team? How do I inspire them? How do I keep them focused? How do I do this to increase performance for everybody? And then on the other side of the equation, when I'm working with sales professionals, regardless of the industry, you know, I've lost my fire. I can't seem to get out of bed. I don't have the drive I used to. I'm overwhelmed. I'm in neutral. I feel like I'm going in circles. Sometimes it's a little bit of both, right? We have to work with the manager or the owner, whoever is leading that team. And then sometimes we have to work with the team members. But today we're going to be talking about, from a leadership perspective, what's the best thing you can do to motivate your team, and what are some of the top things that work well for you. And a lot of the information I'm going to share with you is things that I do with clients now, and I'm going to share some best practices that, again, depending on the industry and where you are in the process, what works for one person or one team may not work for you. So I'd like to just jump right in and kind of throw out some of the questions that I get asked. And again, as questions come up, we'll answer them. But I want to set the tone and the preference. Why do we want a motivated sales team? Why as a leader or a manager do you want your team to be motivated? And the interesting thing is, and I used to work for a boss, he was kind of funny. He's like, you know what? I don't care if you're motivated or not, just do your job. And it's funny, we all work with some of these people. That's great. It's easier said than done. But what happens is, uh, I use this analogy of a boat that's been in the water for a long time, or a car that's been driven well past its tune-up. You may have the best car in the world, the most expensive sports car, fine German engineering or Italian, depending on, your preference. But over time, it needs a tune-up. And, regular wear and tear, usage, things happen. And if you're the driver of that car, you need to be the person responsible for tuning that up. As a sales manager or the owner, depending on your team, you are responsible for keeping your team in shape. So, what are some of the things that you may see, kind of like symptoms of your team needs to be motivated? Other than poor sales results, what are some of the things that you see? Now, I'm going to take a moment because I know there's some people getting on the call. People are asking questions. Barry, I'm going to throw this over to you. And I know we've talked about this in the past. What type of people, and I know we've talked with a lot of salespeople, what's the common theme that you see when people say, I've either lost my fire, my drive, my motivation, or working with managers who say, I'm cracking that whip, I can't seem to get anybody going? Anything come to mind? Any good examples that you can share?
I think a lot, as you mentioned, it's not one size fits all. And different people have different things that motivate them. Some salespeople like direction and structure, and some like hands-off managers. So if you have someone who doesn't like direction and structure and they are being micromanaged, that's going to lead to burnout very quickly because they're going to feel like someone is holding their head underwater. Conversely, if there's someone who likes structure and boundaries and good, solid mentoring and leadership, and their manager is a hands-off leader, they may feel lost and very quickly get overwhelmed. So those are the two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right. Thank you, Barry. So Barry, and the reason why I wanted to get Barry's perspective, she had worked in ophthalmology. I had come from an orthopedic background, and I spent a lot of time working in the operating room. Barry spent a lot of years working in the office setting with many physicians. And the funny thing is, there's a commonality that you see across multiple specialties and disciplines when it comes to salespeople losing their drive, right? Company culture, management, leadership style, communication. You get tactical and psychological obstacles that prevent people from moving forward. So one of the things that's happening, I think, and again, if you're a manager and you've been out there for a couple of years, you do this on a regular basis. So again, I don't think I'm going to be sharing anything new other than just a reminder on some of the best practices on how to motivate your team. And if you're a new manager or an aspiring manager, how you would like to think about using your particular leadership style to motivate your team. I rather, and here's a personal preference, when it comes to team development, and I've worked with a number of teams personally and professionally in my volunteer, military, Navy, my volunteer organizations, motivation is nice, but I would rather inspire from the inside than motivate from the outside for a couple reasons. But in scouting, and I use this a lot with the youth, do I want to light the fire under somebody or do I want to light the fire inside of them? So it's very interesting when you can get somebody to buy in and see and tie their vision, their dreams, their objectives, and align it with the company objectives. That's when the magic happens. And again, if you're in the process of hiring a new team member, or if you're in the process of transitioning, and you're trying to align your goals with the company goals, that's part of that interview process, right? When you're out there and you're telling people, I'm a good fit for your company, I can sell you the product, that's half the battle, right? There's a technical component, salesmanship, but then there's also a fit, right? Soft skills, attitude, value. How do I know that you're going to hit the ground running for me when you come on board? So again, as a reminder, I think the first thing you want to do is, how do you do a checkup or a check-in, right? How do you check the temperature of your team? And different people do it different ways, different organizations do it differently. But the challenge is, you want to be able to have a way or a process to do a checkup on your team and really focus on helping them have an open line of communication, because it's like the early warning light on your car, right? If something's out of alignment, you need fluids, that light goes on to give you a heads up. So what happens is, as an organization, and I've seen both sides, right? This is where we go from one end of the spectrum to another, and finding that balance is a challenge. Some people want to check in, if you're a manager, with your team on a regular basis. That's great. What's regular? Some salespeople want to be touched base with on a daily basis, a weekly basis, or monthly or as needed, right? So again, I've worked with some great managers and some other people who, it's a learning process, right? So what happens is, if you're working with a manager and you understand what he needs and they understand what you need, you can find out what a regular touch in, right? How often do we do a frequent team check-in? And it might be slightly different for everybody. If you're local enough, you can get together once a week, once a month, once a quarter for a meeting, depending how big of an organization. The nice thing is, with video, you have the ability now to do a face-to-face check-in, or you may be spending time putting out fires because you have a large team, and some of the people, I always talk about the top 10% and the bottom 10% may get your attention as a manager or a leader, and those 80% may not get that TLC that you're looking for. So create that motivational environment by having frequent check-ins. And the other thing I would say in line with that is, how often do you do a training, right? You want to train your team to keep them sharp. And again, a great analogy, if you were a professional athlete, you don't just train when you have a game coming up, right? You're training constantly. So when you do play, whether it's once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, depending on the sport, you're in the top of your game. You can hit the ground running. You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, you develop a strategy, and it's continuous quality improvement. So what happens is, ongoing training will allow the sales professional as well as the manager to understand how their team is playing. Again, coming from orthopedics in the OR, we had a lot of training on product, on the anatomy and physiology, on materials, and again, over the years, a lot of technical training. Sometimes we weren't able to spend enough time on professional development, sales skills, time management, communication, other things, strategic planning that I needed to follow up with. So if you as an organization can develop this motivational environment, when people come in, they're going to feel well supported and they're going to want to be part of that team. I think the next part of this that I'd like to share is emulating best practices. The advantage I have now, which I didn't have years ago when I was started my sales career, is when I worked within one industry or specialty, whether it was orthopedics, trauma, biologics, right? When you work in one subspecialty, we have a little bit of a narrow or a window or a tunnel vision, and we don't really get a chance to develop best practices or emulate best practices from other industries. So as I started getting more comfortable and confident in my abilities, the internet and local sales groups and local management groups, I was able to go to other organizations and industries that were 180 degrees, right? Not everyone sold into the operating room, but if you were calling on high level, highly trained decision makers, i.e., lawyers, uh, other professionals, other than physicians, what were other companies doing and how did they call on that? So I was able to develop relationships with other people and emulate some of those best practices going forward and carry them over into my organization, into my industry. And again, depending on your team and the company culture, some companies do a great job of cross pollinating and bringing people in from the outside and adapting some of those other practices. I think it's very, uh, I would say, on the cutting edge. And you want companies who can be open to that without realizing, because it does happen, right? How many companies have been there for so long? I was just watching a documentary on Microsoft talking about how positioned they were in the early 90s with Windows and DOS and Internet Explorer, and they basically had built a barrier. They blocked the competition out, but they also didn't have their finger on the pulse of what was happening. And in retrospect, they lost out to Google, Amazon, and Facebook for other things that they wanted to get their foot in early, but they were so focused on certain things. So if you have an open-minded uh, company and organization that's open to sharing best practices, you're going to bring people in to help you stay sharp and current going forward. And the last thing I want to talk about, at least on this motivational environment, is to remember one size doesn't fit all. And that's a very interesting approach. But again, in orthopedics, I worked for a company that specialized in trauma. It's called, now it's called DePuy Synthes, but I worked for Synthes in the past. And it was very interesting. One of the things that our company did at the time was provide extra small and extra large implants to carry to provide implants to the wide range of bodies out there, right? Because you can't take somebody and adjust their size. So whether you have a small statured adult or a large adult, you need an implant to fit them. And in the trauma market, unlike the total joint market, you didn't take the bone and shave it the way you do in the total joint to put the knee or the hip in. In the implant market, you wanted to align the bone and fixate it to hold it in place so it would heal quickly. The funny thing is, years ago, this was something I didn't realize, but I learned, especially over the last 15 years or so, is that when I'm working with clients, doing an intake form and understanding what motivates and drives them allows me to understand them. And here's the funny part. There are tools that I use. There are assessments, there's questionnaires, there's equipment that will allow me to help understand them. But it's no different than what we did with our customers when they were out in the field. Every surgeon I called on had a specific need, and every surgeon was motivated by something different. So whether you're providing uh, services or products to your customers and your clients, we need to find out what's motivating them to purchase, to buy, to use you, why they're not using other people. And good managers, good leaders take the time to do that. And there are some tools that I use that can reduce that time, but it's very interesting to remember one size doesn't fit all. And I was guilty, no doubt about it, right? I thought other people communicated like me. I thought other people saw the world like I did, but that was part of that learning curve going out there, realizing that not every orthopedic hand surgeon or every orthopedic trauma surgeon approached it differently. And when you realize that your team is made up of individuals, all of a sudden now, as that leader, you become that conductor, facilitator, and their coach slash manager to help bring the best out of them, just like a professional athlete. That's why this is so great. And helping people get back on track is such a rewarding job. And I love helping organizations do that, because it's just like a little bit of a tune-up. Do you need air in the tires? Do you have to change the oil? Sometimes it's just cleaning the windshield so they can get a better view of what they're doing. So with that being said, I'm going to take a break for a moment, see if there's any questions. Barry may have a question that came in. I may have one on my end. Barry, anything coming in on your end?
Don't see any right now, but I'm waiting for them.
All right. Well, I have one question that was emailed to me the other day, and I want to share it with the group because it's something that I run into all the time. Sometimes I'll get calls from people who say, you know, I'm looking at my company, and when I started here, I was on fire. I was very excited to work here, and everything was firing on all cylinders. And I felt like this was a great place to be. But over the last 6, 12, 18, 2 years, something changed, and it's like the wind is out of my sails. And the question came up, what do I do about it? Is there anything I can do about it? And the funny part is, it's always a double-edged question, right? Do you want to do something? Is this company still important, valuable to you? Do you still like the product, the company, the culture, the management staff? Is this a company you want to be? Or are you getting a little burned out because you've been working so hard and you've been trying to adjust your style because of the demands of the industry, your customers, the company? And I think the biggest challenge here is finding out, again, what's preventing you from going forward. And that's where you need to step back and really have a critical look in the mirror to say, what is holding you back? Is it something internal or is it something external? And that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's not, non-judgmental, right? We're all friends here. Things happen. Um, Sometimes people take a job not realizing what it entails, right? I don't know what I don't know. I may have a conversation with a good friend of mine or a manager, and their perception is slightly different from my perception. So we take a job. I mean, it's no different than I do with my wife, right? We'll both shake our head in agreement, not realizing we're agreeing on something totally different, 180 degrees. So what happens is there's a couple things you can do from both sides of the equation. If you're a sales professional who feels like you're in this rotary and you're in this holding spot and you're saying, geez, I can't seem to get traction, is there anything I can do? And the simple answer is yes. The question boils down to, what are you willing to do? How much you're willing to invest in terms of energy and change, and what's your time frame? Because part of it is, if you're adjusting your habits, your outlook, your perception, if you're kind of tuning things up, it's hard when you've been focused on doing things a certain way, right? Tradition, custom, habits. Sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it for so long. So what you want to do is take a step back and be very objective. And this is where your friends or family or manager can help you. Am I doing everything that I was doing when I started? Is it me? Or has something changed within my territory, my job? And it does happen. As you know, the healthcare industry has evolved over the last 5, 10, 15, 25 years. But sometimes companies merge. They bring a new product in. They depreciate a new product. They expand their sales team. They reduce their sales team. They bring on new managers. They They have new managers turn over, sales members turn over. So if you've looked at the stages of team development, and I still like the stages of team development, a high performance team, sometimes that team that you're part of, for one brief moment, just like a championship team, right? Every 4 or 5 years, they get to that peak, they win the championship, and then they go back to rebuild because things turn over. So this could be a natural evolution of what's going on with your territory. Also, I hate to say this, but if you're been in this job 2, 3, 5 years, you're a little bit older, wiser, experienced, mature. Your outlook is different. You've grown, you've changed. Some of your needs may have changed. When you came onto that job, some of the things that you were looking to do, you weren't able to do, or you have accomplished all of your goals and you need a new challenge, right? Maybe the job's not challenging. Maybe you don't have the authority. You may not have the support for many different reasons. So sometimes you have to take a step back and say, what can I do to revamp, reinvigorate, recharge my perspective, my outlook, or maybe it's developing that relationship with that manager or coworker that you're working with. On the other hand, if you're the manager of that team and you're in a leadership role or even a senior sales professional, are there warning signs that things are happening with members of your team? Is you can have a high performing person that's not really happy. It could be because of something's out of alignment, and they may be able to keep up that performance for a short term, but long term it's going to be really hard to keep them focused and motivated. So in a sense, what can we do as managers, as leaders, to help our team stay focused? And I think part of it is having that discussion, that communicate to motivate, so to speak, right? That one-on-one meeting, finding out what motivates that person. One of the things I hear from leaders all the time is, I thought I knew what motivated Mary or Johnny because that's what they told me. And sometimes, and I'm just as guilty, I thought that's what motivated me, but I didn't really think it motivated me. But that's what I thought, right? Society, the industry, the culture. Sometimes we don't have the language or we don't have the concepts to understand. But one of the things that's very interesting when you dig down, money is a good motivator for most sales professionals, but not for every sales professional. Sometimes they need feedback from their manager. Maybe they need someone they can bounce ideas off, right? That democratic, participatory management style. Maybe they need to be acknowledged as an expert in their field. Maybe they need to take, Friday afternoons off to spend time with their children. There are so many psychic rewards that may not cost money. And I know a lot of companies, which makes sense. Hey, we're going to give you a bonus to go out there and do a good job. But sometimes they want to be appreciated, right? Sometimes they want acknowledgement with their peers. Maybe they want to be seen as that expert in that field. And there are companies that provide recognition awards, trips, certificates, training, promotion. The tough part with salespeople and some of these companies, it's hard to get promoted if you're in a sales role. And again, as you know, this is not an easy fix, but part of it is opening that line of communication. If you have an HR department, sometimes they can help. Maybe there's something going on. And again, this happens, has nothing to do with the manager. Maybe it's something going on with that sales professional that he needs or she needs to get off their chest and talk to somebody. Unfortunately, and it could be a sign of the times, and it could be a male focus thing, right? Sometimes we hold it in and we don't say anything because we don't want to be seen as weak or infallible or flawed. So sometimes we hold things in, and it used to be just men, but now it's happening with women. It used to be more men in the past. But unfortunately, we need to almost nip it in the bud before it grows, right? Discontentment, frustration, apathy, a lot of these signs, which over time will impact performance. So again, there's no quick fix. There's just a number of things that you want to look at. And this is more of a process, right? Keeping that line of communication open with your team, having the team being able to communicate with the manager, but more importantly, when you do sense something, what do you do as a manager or a senior person out in the field? How do you address it? And I think one of the things that, excuse me, that I just want to close as we get to the bottom of the hour here with is, this is an ongoing challenge. There's new information coming out. There's ways, excuse me, there's ways to approach this all the time. I think I've shared this in the past. Right now, depending on who you talk to, there's 5 generations in the workforce. And people forget that sometimes, depending on who you're talking with. But there's at least 2 or 3 generations, colleagues, co-workers, but also your clients and people within your organization. So understanding and communicating across that spectrum is going to take a superior communicator, relationship builder, and manager to understand everybody across that spectrum. And as we have younger people coming into the workforce, their needs are different than people who've been out there for 25 years or so. So what happens is, even though one size doesn't fit all, they may not even be looking at the same thing that we looked at 25 years ago. So again, there's a lot more to this. This is the tip of the iceberg. There's some great books out there. One of them that I really enjoy is The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. I think it's Lencioni. I forget how to spell it, but I'll share the link. And 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And 2 good books. He's written a number of books, but those 2 books stand out. And I've used those books and those concepts with a number of organizations to help them pick the ideal team player. But ideally, or more importantly, is how to take that to the next step to pick them, onboard them, but also keep them motivated going forward. This is just like, again, I'll go back to a car or a high-performing athlete. You don't go to the gym once. You don't tune up your car once. The longer you keep the car, the more care that it's going to need to run more efficiently. So I'm going to leave it at that. And we have a number of people who I think enjoyed listening. We didn't get too many questions live. But again, feel free to submit your questions. Support at salesplusmvp.com. Next week, November 5th, we'll be talking about overcoming sales objections. And that's another one near and dear to my heart. And I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's sales objections coming forward. So before we go, Barry, any last minute housekeeping things that we need to address?
No, just if you have questions, you can mail them to either Steve or myself. I am Bari at salesmvp.com, B-A-R-I, and Steve is Steve at salesplusmvp.com.
All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us and listening. I hope I was able to shed a couple of reminders with you and share them. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.